Hey, how's it going, guys? Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on RenderMan 21 PrimVar's. I didn't find any on YouTube, and I was kind of confused about them when I first started out, so I thought I'd help the community and give back. Uh, just wanted to say I did this sorry, I did this tutorial before, and the recorder crashed when I stopped, and it was about half an hour. And so if you're watching this, that probably means it worked. So yeah, thumbs up. um, so let's start. We have a simple scene here. We have a ketchup bottle and a mustard bottle. It's just basic assets from one of my old projects that I did for a friend. And so let's start by going to the outliner. So I have these groups here. And the appeal in PrimVar's basically is that you can have one shader for multiple objects and then change variables within that object per object. Change variables within the shader per object. Sorry. Uh, so for example, if we had one shader for both of these bottles, and then we just change one variable, which is the color variable. So this would be red and this would be yellow. That would make it much easier than just assigning two different shaders. So let's do that now. Let's select all of this and assign new material, and we're going to go Pixar surface. We're just going to name this bottle surface. All right. And so we have one shader for everything. All of these parts have one shader. But if we make this red, they're both going to be red. So how are we going to change that? All right, so we're going to introduce attributes and PrimVar's. So what you want to do is go to the shape node. When you're working with meshes, they're going to look like this. You have to click on display and make sure this is checked shapes. When you're working with PrimVar's, you have to use shapes and not the transform node. So let's select all the shape nodes. Alright, so now that we have that selected, let's go modify, add attribute. Alright, so under long name, you want to add a prefix, and this prefix is what RenderMan searches for when it's calling variables through PrimVar. And the prefix is rman, and then if you're doing a color, you would press C. If you're doing a float value, then you'd put F. But we're doing color today, so let's put rman C, and then we're going to write bottle color. Okay, so let's make sure it's on vector, because a vector is three values, R, G, and B, which is what we're going to be passing to the PrimVar, red, green, and blue values. All right, let's click OK. And so if you click on the shapes, you notice that each one has a variable, red, green, blue. They're at 0 right now, which would be black. We don't want that. We want red. So if we look at this, the RGB values are 1, 0.137, and 0.137 for this kind of red. You have to make sure that it's in the 0 to 1 range, because if you pass it in the 0 to, I believe it's 255, yeah. If you do it that way, it's not going to work in the PrimVar's, I believe. So for the ketchup, let's do 1.137, 0.137. So that's going to be red. 1.137, 0.137. And mustard is going to be 1.767, 0.137. Sorry guys, I just memorized these values because I did this tutorial about 7 times. Alright, so now we have the values for each object. This is mustard, this is ketchup. So how are we going to, still, they're both still red, obviously. Kick that off. They're both red. Alright, so how are we going to make it change? So we're going to go to our hypershade, and let's expand this Pixar surface. Let's add a Pixar PrimVar node. This is what is going to change everything. Alright, let's go result RGB and then hook it up to diffuse color. Change it to color and then make the variable name what we did before. You don't need to add the prefix rmanc this time, because it's already searching. RenderMan is already searching for that when you're using PrimVar's. So just write the variable name that we used before, which was bottle color, right? So now if we, oh, that's white. Let's just, there we go. Let's just IPR this and see what happens. All right, so already we're getting some results. We have a yellow bottle here and a red bottle here. So that's the basics of Pixar PrimVar. That is the bare bones down to the basics. And so now let's get a little bit more advanced. Let's change some more variables, all right? All right, so these strips here, I want to have bumps on them, but I don't want the bumps to be on here. So how are we gonna do that? Let's open up the hypershade and let's add a Pixar bump. Let's go result N to bump normal. And I already have a ramp created. It's really basic. It's just white and gray every 0.25. And then I have a manifold on that. And it's repeated 100 times. All right. So that's pretty simple. So let's go result R, input bump. If we IPR this, we're going to see that the bump is on the entire mesh, and we don't want it. We only want it. We don't want it like that. We only want it on this little strip here. All right. So how are we going to affect that with PrimVar's? For those of you that already guessed, good for you. All right. So for those of you that didn't, let's get into that. So we're going to add another attribute to this. So let's go Windows, Outliner. And let's select all the shape nodes again. And let's click Modify, Add Attribute. RenderMan, and this time we're going to go F because we're passing a float value. And we're going to say bump scale. And make sure this is on float. Remember, we're passing one value this time because we're only affecting the scale. We don't need RGB values. So let's go OK. So now every shape has a variable called bump scale. And we know that the bump scale for this should be 0 because we don't want bump on this. We want bump on this. So let's set this to 1. These are 0. These are 1. This is 1. This is 0. All right. So now let's see what that looks like after we go to the hypershade and click on Pixar PrimVar. Let's add another Pixar PrimVar to this shading network. And let's go result F this time, scale. All right. Keep this on float and just write bump scale. Remember, this is the variable that we just created. So we put it here under variable name. And now if we do another IPR, what do we get? Awesome. So we have bump on just the strip. We are getting some issues with darkness on the bump. We can fix that by just going to adjust amount and setting this to 1 on the bump node. Now we are getting some nice bumping, and it's only on the strip. We have it all on one shader with color variation and bump variation. So, you know, this is the basics in PrimVar. If you get this down, you're going to be using it in every single project, I promise you. It makes things so much easier. And it keeps things efficient. It can reduce your file size if you don't want to add like multiple shaders. You know, and it's basically a necessity, basically. So let me just add some clear coat. Give it a little bit of shine. And we can also put this color PrimVar to, let's make it double-sided since it's plastic. It's a little bit translucent. Make like 0.7. See how that's looking. That might be a little bit too much. Alright, so this is our ketchup bottle shader. Pretty simple. All under one shader. Different variations of color. You can make it whatever color you want. If your art director says, you know what, in this planet, ketchup is gray. So we're going to make ketchup gray. So, I mean, it's just an example. You can change whatever you want on the fly, and it's really simple. All right, so now we're going to be going into a little bit more detail, a little bit more complex scene. So we're going to be working with textures and Python and SE expression. So let's get into that now. All Alright guys, so this is a little bit more of a complex scene. We have a bookshelf here, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to have a texture file. We're going to have multiple texture files, and we're going to randomize them per book so that we can have a nice variation in the bookshelf. Alright, so like before, we're going to start by selecting all the book covers. Alright, and we're just going to assign a new material. Let's name it book cover surface. Alright, and so this is all one shader, and we're going to have variation within the shader per object. Alright, so if you guys remember, we had to select the shape node and not the actual transform node, which is what I'm selecting right now. But we have 67 books, so I don't think anyone is going to go one by one and select the shape node. So here's a little Python script that we can use to select each of them, and I'll start from scratch. Just select all of them at once, and it's going to be simpler. Alright, so let's go import Maya.cmds.smc. Alright, so this is basically... Sorry, I'm not going to be going over Python right now. I was going to, but let's just go over this. Let's focus on PrimVar's. So we're going to go import my.cmds.smc, and then we're going to say mc.ls, and we're going to write, we need the name of the books, and they are called book cover shape 1, book cover shape 2, book cover shape 3, so on and so forth. So we're going to say book cover shape, and then we're going to put a star symbol. And what that is going to do is it's going to take anything with the name book cover shape, whatever comes after it doesn't matter, as long as it has book cover shape, the name book cover shape before the star, then it's going to add that to the selection. So let's just close that, and then we're going to write books equals that. Then we're going to say mc dot select books, and that's going to select that variable that we just created. Let me deselect that, and if you run this script, you can see that all the shape nodes are selected and not the actual transform nodes. Very simple script. I use it in all my projects as well when I'm working with PrimVar's. Now that we have all the shape nodes selected, let's go to modify. Sorry, let me just clarify one thing. You can see how each one is called book cover shape 1, book cover shape 2. If you want to do that uniformly, you basically select all your meshes, and then make sure this is on rename, okay? And then you just write it here, and then it's going to automatically just write the name book cover shape, or book cover, sorry, and then it's going to number them automatically 1 through 67. So yeah, that's just that. Alright, so let's go to modify. We can close this for now. Let's go to modify, add attribute. And remember, we have to add our prefix, which is RMan, and then we're doing a float value this time, which is F. Okay? So let's call this float value book variation. And we're going to call it float. And we're going to put on float, sorry. So now each one of these has a variable called book variation. Alright, cool. Now, we're going to be using SC expression to work with textures. Book cover surface. Alright, so let's drop in a Pixar SC expression, and we're going to set it to result RGB diffuse color. Alright, so what SC expression allows you to do is set an expression, obviously, and then we have 4 color inputs, and we're going to be setting each texture file in these color inputs. So I have several book cover textures, and we're going to put each of them in cover 1, cover 2, cover 3, cover 4 respectively. And then float input 1 is going to decide which color of these 4 is going to be passed to this shader right here. Alright, so for the expression, it's very simple. We're just going to say choose float input 1, comma, color input 1, comma, color input 2, comma, color input 3. Sorry guys, color input 4. Alright, so it's really simple if you read it out. Color input 1, float input 1, which is this, is going to choose whether we're sending color input 1, 2, 3, or 4 to the shader. That's basically what this expression is saying. Alright, so now we need to put these textures into color 1, 2, 3, and 4 respectively. So let's get Pixar texture, and we're going to need to drop 4 of these. And let's just select these and put 1 to make them small. Alright, so now let's go result RGB for each of them, and then just put them in the color inputs. Alright, cool. So this is our setup. Now let's select these textures that we have of books. I have several, 20 in fact, but we're going to be using 4 today. They're basically the same design, just different colors. But just for the tutorial's sake, we're going to be using 4 different textures. Okay, so now we have that. So like I said, float input 1 is going to decide which of these 4 textures these books will display. Alright, so what we're going to do now is drop a Pixar PrimVar. And I think you can guess where we're going to put this one. We're going to say result F into float input 1. Alright, because float input 1, like I said, chooses these. So let's put it on float, and then the variable name that we chose before was book variation. Alright, cool. So now we're basically all set for that. If we kick off an IPR, this is what we're going to get. Alright, so we have all of the books. Sorry, I need to linearize. I don't know how to say that. Linearize all of these shaders. Alright, all these textures, because they did start off as a JPEG. So let's make those linear. Alright, so what we have here is basically color input 1, because all of these variables are on 0. So 0 is going to be color input 1. Alright, so if we set this to, let's say we set this big book to 0.3, and let's refresh that and see what happens. Alright, so as you guys can see, the texture for this book has changed to color input 2. It's on 0.25 increments. So 0.25 is going to be color input 2, 0.5 is going to be color input 3, and 0.75 is going to be color input 4. Yeah. Anything between those numbers, it doesn't matter. It's just going to pick the closest one. Alright. So you can see how we can quickly get variation. Let's say we set this book to 0.93, 0.94. And let's see what we get. We're going to get color input 4, which is a orangish texture. Alright, so you can see how we get that. Alright, so what if we want to randomize this entire bookshelf without having to select each book and then changing the variable one by one? Well, there is a Python script that we can do that with. So let's go to Python. Alright, let's make sure we import random. And let's write random.seed, and then just a random number. Doesn't matter what it is. Alright, just deselect that. And we're going to make a for loop. So we're going to say for I in range 1 through 67, because we have 67 books. And we're going to say we're gonna say rand equals random dot uniform, and then we have to put the range here, and we know that the range is 0 to 1. 0.25 is color input 1, 0 is color input 0, like I said, and then so we're gonna say 0 to 1. So that's rand. That's gonna be our random value variable. So now let's say mc.set attribute, and this is going to be called, what we're going to write here is the book name, the book names. So we're going to say book cover shape, and then we're going to put the % d dot rman f book variation. And then we're going to close that and then put the % again. Again, if you guys want to learn how to script like in Python for Maya, just YouTube some tutorials. I don't know how to do it either. I literally just know how to do just this stuff. I don't know how to use Python that much. So yeah, we're going to put a comma there, and then this is going to be what the attribute is. So the attribute is going to be rand, which is a random value, which is what we created here. Random value from 0 to 1. All right. And so what this in parentheses is saying for bookshelf cover, for book cover shape, and then whatever number comes after that for the for loop of 1 to 67, take this variable rman book variation and set it to rand. And rand is a random value from 0 to 1, and it's going to randomize for each loop, each execution in the loop. So if we execute this, let's see what we get. Let's open up the attribute spreadsheet. Attribute spreadsheet. Let me select all of, let me just run a quick script to select these books. Sorry guys. Okay, so now we have a list of all the rman book variation, and it's going to be showing all of them. All of them are 0 except the ones that we just set. I obviously just set this to 0.3 and 0.94, so we can just put that back to 0. Alright, so now if we run our original script, what we're going to get is variation for each, we're going to get variation for each one of these. So let's run this right now. Beautiful. We have variation for each one of these. It's a random number, and basically that's going to drive the book color, the texture. And this is a technique that you guys are going to be using a lot in your projects. It's very important. If you have variation of numbers for each texture, for each model with recurring models like bookshelves, or let's say a bag of M&Ms, something like that. If you have random values, you can drive any variable you want in your shader, all right? So let's kick off an IPR and see what we get now. All right, that's beautiful. That's variation within each book, and that's what we wanted. It's a nice looking bookshelf, and that's basically how you guys can do that. Alright, thanks for watching, and subscribe if you guys have any questions, and comment down below. And thanks for watching. Bye.